This is chapter 2 of Stuart Little. It's called Home Problems. So let's get into it. Stuart was also helpful when it came to ping pong. The littles liked ping pong, but the balls would always roll under chairs, sofas, and radiators, and this meant that players were forever stooping down and reaching under things. Stuart soon learned that to chase balls, and it was a great sight to see him coming out from under a hot radiator, pushing a ping pong ball with all of his might and perspiration rolling down his cheek. The the ball of course was almost as high as he was, and he had to throw his whole weight against it in order to keep it rolling. The Littles had a grand piano in their living room, which was all right except the the one of the keys was a sticky and didn't work properly. Mrs. Little said she thought must be a damp weather, but it don't see how it could be the damp weather, for the key had been sticking for about 4 years, during which time there had been many bright, clear days, and anyway the key stuck, and was a great inconvenience to anyone trying to play the piano. It bothered George particularly when he was playing the scarf dance, which was rather lovely. It was George who had the idea of stationing Stuart inside the piano to push the keys up the second it was played. This was no easy job for Stuart. He had to crouch down between the felt hammers so he wouldn't get hit in the head. But Stuart liked it just the same. It was exciting inside the piano, dodging about, and the noise was quite terrific. Sometimes after the long session, he would emerge quite deaf, as though he had just stepped out of an airplane after a long journey, and it would be some little time before he really felt normal again. Mr. and Mrs. Little were often discussed Stuart's but quietly between themselves when he wasn't around, for they had never quite recovered from the shock and surprise of having a mouse in the family. He was so very tiny and presented so many problems to this part parents. Mr. Little and said for one thing, there must be no reference to mice in their conversation. He made Mrs. Little tear from the nursery song book and the page about the three blind mice. See how they run. I don't want Stuart to get a lot of notion in this head, said Mrs. Little. I should feel badly to have my son grow up fearing that a farmer's wife was going to cut off his tail with a carving knife. It is such to make children dream bad dreams when they go to bed at night. Yes, replied Mrs. Little, and I think we had better to start thinking about the poem "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." I think it might embarrass Stuart to hear a mice mentioned in such a belting manner. "That's right," said her husband. "But what shall we say when he comes to that line in the poem? We have to say something. We can't say 'twas the night before Christmas, when all was stirring, not even a creature was stirring. That doesn't sound complete. It needs a word to rhyme with house." "What about louse?" said Mrs. Little. "Or grouse," said Mr. Little. "I suggested souse," remarked George, who had been listening to the conversation from across the room. It was decided that louse was the best substitute for mouse, and so when Christmas came around, Mrs. Little carefully rubbed out the word mouse from the poem and wrote the word louse, and Stuart always thought that the poem went this way: "'Twas the night before Christmas, Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a louse. The thing that worried Mr. Little the most was the mouse hole in the pantry. The hole had been made by a mice in the days before the Littles came in the house, and nothing had been done about stopping it up. Mr. Little was not all sure that he understood Seward's real feeling about the mouse hole. He didn't know where the hole led to, and it made him uneasy to think that Stuart might someday feel the desire to vent into it. After all, he doesn't look at good deals like a mouse, said little Mr. Little to his wife, and I never seen a mouse yet that didn't like to go into a hole.